Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Hiring and Inspiring. Today's guest is Codie Hair. Codie is, a fairly recent-ish connection of mine over the last couple of years. Codie's a salesperson, an investor, a sales leader, a proud father and family man, and also a top bloke. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with him today and exploring his journey, because his story is a really interesting one. He came over to Australia from his original homeland of New Zealand 10 years ago, with I guess very little on his back at the time, and has developed himself, and his career has really taken off in the time since. He's done a lot of great things. Did 10 years with the business called Akzo Nobel, took things to new heights there, and did some really awesome stuff. And he's also doing some really cool things in his new role. So can't wait to get stuck into it. Codie, with that introduction, mate, welcome to the show. How are you getting on?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me on. I'm really looking forward to today, actually. So, um, yeah, obviously we've been in touch for a couple of years. I've seen a lot of the good stuff that you do on socials and LinkedIn, and maybe taken a few of those out of your book. I think you do some really good work there, motivationally as well. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, mate. I do appreciate it. I've touched upon there in that introduction, sort of maybe what you've done, and what you're doing most recently. I actually want to start. I want to go back in time. I want to start at the beginning. Let's say at the beginning of your career. You've been in sales since you were 17 years old.
Hmm.
Um, what led you initially to get into sales let's be honest, such a young age?
Yeah, I suppose so. Even if we go back, I mean, a little bit further than that. So um, I started off in humble beginnings, I suppose, on dairy farms. Growing up in a reasonable sized family. Five kids, which kept mum and dad busy, obviously. But was dairy farmed, homeschooled. Didn't come from I suppose, a top tier education. And that, to be honest, kind of narrowed. It kind of narrowed my path. I would say, going from homeschooling into university, and chasing down, being a lawyer or any sort of higher profile role just wasn't such an option for that, for where we were. So I seen way back then sales was a good opportunity, um, to be able to get on the ladder, and then through sort of hard work be able to build up. So I suppose I had aspirations to really climb ladders and be somewhere, and I felt like sales was a good way of doing that as a path without having the much needed qualifications, I suppose, of what some of the other jobs in the world were. Yeah.
And how did you perform in that initial role? Like how did you actually get on, doing a sales role at 17?
Yeah, well, I suppose I started ground roots, right? So rather than the traditional sales, being good with speaking and talking too much, I sort of took a backward step from that and more relied on value and value proposition, and actually understanding um, things from the customer's point of view. How paint was applied, and the application side of things. And I just tried to become an expert in that field. Um, and then, to be honest, success sort of started rolling from that. So um, I think in any sort of sales role, knowing your craft inside out can really differentiate you from others who are just looking for quick wins. So it was a slower process, but the way it worked for me was just it worked really, really well.
Yeah, so you sounds like you formed some really good habits at an early age, and you weren't just in it to for the quick wins and the money and the adulations. It was actually to get into a career and develop yourself from a young age, and learn the right things to do by the sound of things.
Yeah, well, it was just people. That's what I suppose that's where the success came, was just understanding how to provide value to people. At the end of
Mm.
the day, you do that and you do it well. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, you'll do well.
Mm.
Um, so that I'm very interested in psychology, the psychology of people and why they do things as well. Um, and yeah, learning that throughout the years and interacting with people, um, the variability of it, I suppose, it's really interesting. So yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
I know you had initially, you mentioned you had a bit of success in those early days, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. I believe there was some, ups and downs, and a bit of, in your own words, some reckless behaviour as a younger bloke, which led you to moving to these shores across to Australia, 10 years ago. What sort of played out for you to make the move? How did that all come about?
Yeah, so the I suppose my aspirations in life can also be my downfall as well. I've actually recently, in the last couple of years, been diagnosed with ADHD. So someone who, I suppose, hyper focuses on things and goes really hard into things. Um, and right back then, I didn't have I suppose, the skills and the knowledge and access, and obviously wasn't medicated back then either. Um, and that sort of led to a bit of reckless behaviour, um, in terms of drinking and partying and going out too much and things like that. And it did affect the roles. Obviously I was a high performer, but when it came to the weekends, um, that was sort of the downfall. So that ultimately affected the job. Um, I ended up actually losing that position, unfortunately, which was a blessing in disguise. So I was sort of at a crossroads where I needed to make the jump, to make something of myself. And I seen moving to Australia at the time. I think it was 2013 at the time. Just took a bit of a risk. Um, and he landed in Australia with about I think I had $5,000 at the time. Um, and yeah, the rest.
And that period, it sounds like you definitely took a lot from that. As often is the case, there's never waste a good crisis is the term, I believe. What what did you learn about yourself from that period that you've now applied to your life moving forward?
Um, yeah, I mean, it definitely builds a lot of confidence in yourself. Being able to, I suppose, hit these barriers in life and then still overcome them. I've found myself, um, my most successful times is usually when I've been backed into a corner, somewhat, even if I did put myself there. Um, but but yeah, I mean, the learnings from that around, psychology. I suppose that's what really put an interest into that side of things. Is why do I do that? And then overcoming these things and just trying to improve, really, constant
Yeah.
self improvement.
I think it's about it's sort of that experience you've got in the bank now. So whenever I tend to do this whenever I sort of something hard comes up. I lean on past experience. I was like, well, if I've got through that,
Mm.
then whatever I'm sort of worried about or nervous about in the future, I can now take on. So, and that's, you mentioned the word confidence. It's something I've been thinking about quite a bit recently. How do you actually build confidence? What is confidence? To me, it's about just having that stacks of evidence behind you that you have been able to, you've overcome that challenge or whatever, and that experience of losing your job, the reckless behavior, moving to a new country with not much, and then going on, well, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but then going on to really make a name for yourself over here. you must think that you can always lean on that experience, and I guess that might be something that you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and obviously, I picked up on that. You obviously listened to Alex Hormozy, one of his sayings then, and he has a saying around that about stacking evidence, and
Mm.
sometimes self confidence is delusion unless you have the evidence to back it up, right? And one way to build that is to do hard things. So it's human nature to shy away from hard things, right? We like comfortability. We like things that are easy. Um, but yeah, putting yourself in the deep end, um, providing it doesn't kill you, that's how you stack evidence is by doing hard things. So yeah,
Yeah, it's that feeling. Whenever I feel like I don't want to maybe make that call, or when I don't want to have that conversation or whatever it is, that's a good sign. I know I need to be doing that.
yeah,
That's for me anyway. Like, if you don't have that feeling often, then you're probably getting too comfortable.
totally. Yeah, that's the. To be honest, that's the trigger. We should. The way I look at that is a positive. When you start to feel uncomfortable, that's the trigger that you're growing, right? Or that you need to make a move, or yeah,
Absolutely. You then, once you came over here, I touched upon at the start, you had a really long and successful tenure, a business called Akzo Nobel, great company, global business.
yeah,
You rose through the ranks with them. You had a, as I say, a long tenure with them. How do you sort of reflect on that? That tenure with that business. I'm guessing a lot of fond memories. You stuck around a long time, and a lot of period, a great period of growth by the sound of things. But looking back, how do you reflect on that period?
yeah. To be honest, it's shaped my life. It shaped a lot of um, who I am now. I had a really strong mentor within that business. Um, Actually, the original boss that hired me and gave me the chance, took me on board. Um, and yeah, what I learned at Akzo Nobel, being such I suppose, a big company, big corporate, um, been around for a long, long time, and being exposed to that business or that environment for someone like myself was really good. Yeah. Looking back on it, I'm quite proud of that progression. Obviously, we briefly mentioned where I'd come from and some of the challenges there. To then, my most recent role at that company was national specification manager, so for Australia and part of New Zealand, and obviously, I was tasked with building an entire strategy to grow that business commercially. So, um, yeah, for a business like to be doing that at Akzo Nobel, is a multi-billion-dollar company globally and sort of a market leader in paint and powder. It was that was evidence again, right? That was 10 years of stacking the evidence. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Give yourself a pat on the back, mate. You did some great things there
yeah,
in that time, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to blow your own trumpet a little bit. If there was maybe someone listening who was be looking to do what you did and go through the ranks, so to speak, and have success at a young age with a global company, what do you think you did that allowed you to do that? What sort of behaviors or character traits did you aim to sort of really demonstrate in your roles across the business?
sure. Um, Probably the one word that comes to mind and sticks out for me is resilience and sort of trusting the process, I suppose. So when I say resilience, um, it's I suppose it becomes very easy to look at the new bright and shiny thing, right? Um, but just doing the basics and just sticking true to doing the basics. Like you said before, making the call. You know, it's not flashy. It doesn't, maybe doesn't excite things, but doing those basic things right, doing them often, and being consistent and resilient. Um, I think you always win in the end. Um, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, doing them often, being consistent. That's something I always lean on. That's my main thing. I think, to anyone
Yeah.
to looking to achieve anything. How did you manage to sort of stay consistent? How important was that sort of consistency and discipline in the role?
Mm. For me, it's to be honest that it's quite easy. I'm quite a competitive person, so
Yeah,
the competitiveness, um, trying to whether it's your colleague, your coworker, or it's your competition in the market, doing more than them is sort of the first step. That's where my mind goes. Um, so within that, that just automatically drives consistency, if that makes sense. It's a blessing to have that competitive nature, because it's within that is resilience and is consistency and momentum and all these other traits, right? But without that, things would be a bit more difficult. I would need to be a lot more organized and
Mhm.
structured and things like that, um, which is often someone with ADHD is not those things. Um, so I'm just lucky that I've got the competitive side to drive that, I suppose.
That competitive edge you mentioned. Do you find yourself competing more with, say, other colleagues, or the competitors, whatever, or do you find yourself competing against yourself? Because a lot of people say, compete against, be better than you were yesterday or whatever.
Sure.
What drives you? Be better than yourself or be better than your competition?
Firstly, it's being better than myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you're only focusing on being better than your colleague or your competition, um, that's going to run out. You know, eventually you'll hit your target or your milestone, and then what do you do? You know, um, I think you've got to be. I think you've got to be competing against yourself and just that constant improvement, right? Um, yeah, yeah, it's never.
Otherwise, you sort of lose if you are just focusing on other people, other your competitors. You lose sight on what you're doing. Maybe.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely comes first.
Yeah.
Doing things right first, and improving on things um, should be the number one focus. But yeah,
You mentioned resilience. That was maybe the number one thing that allowed you to have success, especially in that role with Akzo Nobel.
so
It's something I think about, because a lot of my clients is, I'm recruiting salespeople. They ask, the number one character. They say similar to you. I want someone who's resilient, and I'm trying to interview candidates. I'm trying to find, is this person resilient? And they might say that they are, but how do you actually demonstrate that? How does someone, or even yourself, how do you think you built that? How does someone build resilience? Is it something that someone just naturally has, or have they had to build it over time? Do you think?
I think you build it over time. I mean, definitely upbringing. So I mean, nature versus nurture has a lot to do with these things, right? But I think someone can build that through um, through stacking that evidence, like we
Yeah.
spoke about. I mean, that's how you build confidence, which, in the same token, is resilience. Um, yeah, you just have to do. It's just action. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one's going to do it for you. Um, yeah,
It gets easier over time. The first loss you take in the sale, the first time you lose a deal or something like that. I always remember back in the day, they hurt more than they do now.
yeah,
So I think naturally,
yeah,
I've just built that level of resilience. So I think you do,
yeah.
but I think you can do things, as you say, your upbringing. It can alter it. Nature versus nurture. It's a good debate.
I think
Um,
it's a bit.
sorry, you go.
I think it's a bit cliche, but before that, the key thing, and again, it is cliche, is your why. So many people talk about it, right? Simon Sinek and all these motivational speakers about your why. Um, Understanding that and knowing what your why is and what motivates you or why you're getting up and actually going and doing that
Yeah.
thing, I think is key. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm quite surprised that I'm not surprised, but a lot of people I speak to haven't probably gone into that thought process yet.
Yeah.
And I think figuring that out and understanding why you do things,
Mm.
Um, yeah, is the first step, in my view.
I read a book recently by a fellow Kiwi of yours, Dan Carter. His book that came out
Mhm.
earlier this year. He does a whole piece in his book about so it's similar to the Simon Sinek why, but he calls it like a purpose. So he has to, before setting goals are great, whatever, but he talks about having a purpose, and that gets him out of bed every day. So he talks about his purpose throughout his career was to be an All Black great, and
Yep.
that was what drove him every day.
Mm.
And it's something, but it was interesting because it was an evolving sort of why and a purpose. Because after he retired, I'm no longer a rugby player. My identity's gone. What's my purpose? And he struggled for a little bit until he had to sort of repurpose it all. So um, I don't know if you're into your rugby, mate. I imagine you might be. But
A little bit.
yeah, that's one to check out.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And it is one of those things that evolves often. To be honest,
Mm,
I find myself over the years um, changing, changing that purpose often. So originally, maybe it was going way back, maybe it was proving something to myself. Then it moved into, okay, money, making money. Um, and then as you start to move into more management type roles um, in a work situation, it's about bringing other people up. Your purpose then becomes your, other people in the business. Um, so it's just an ever changing process,
yeah,
right? Um, and there's not always one. You've always got competing
yeah,
purposes. Being a father is
yeah,
obviously my number one um, purpose at the moment. That's the key number one thing. But you can have purpose in many things, right? Um, and I think just having that and holding that at the front of your mind keeps you going. Yeah.
You mentioned there about money being a key, purpose and driver for you, maybe earlier on in your career.
Yep.
You mentioned to me previously you set yourself a goal to have a net worth of $1 million by the time you're 30 years old, which
Yep.
is something, hope you don't mind me sharing, you achieved.
Sure.
How did you go about doing that? And say maybe someone's listening to this that is, let's say under 30 and they want to hit these big goals like you've done.
Mm.
What sort of steps or advice would you give that person?
Sure. I suppose yeah, growing up. So I had that goal ever since I was very very young. I think I wrote it down on a piece. I still remember writing it down on a piece of paper when I was about 12. Um, I was reading a book called "Who Moved My Cheese." I don't know if you've
Oh
read
yeah,
that.
yeah, I have. Yeah, classic. Yeah.
I was reading that as like a 12-year-old, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that sort of installed no excuses. Um, no one else is going to do it for you. Um, you've got to do these things your own, right? So building that sort of framework as a young age, and then moving into actually implementing it and trying to make that money. I suppose the steps. So when I moved to Australia, like I mentioned, very little money in the back pocket, starting work. Um, I seen property as I suppose, a strong investment vehicle for someone who didn't have a lot of resource at the time. So basically, went full in, understood every which way I could, one, get into property, and then two, extract money out of it. So very slow moving investment vehicle, right? But high leverage. So you don't need to put a lot of money in to actually get control of a larger asset. Um, so essentially, that's what I did, was just go on the path of trying to build a property portfolio. Um, Built up to 4 properties recently, um, and then obviously the growth over those 4 properties, as well as a bit of a share portfolio on the side. Um, yeah, sort of reached that milestone within about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But you did it from a young age because a lot of people I don't think get into investing,
Mm.
or they it's sort of on their radar as maybe someone like yourself in their early 20s or at the age that you started doing it.
Sure.
That's the key, isn't it? You get in. That's probably what you would advise someone:
Yeah,
get in young, and it builds over time.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can have I'd say it's a very small percentage where you have your luck, your wins.
Yeah.
You might invest in a small cap company or something that's on the edge of, uh, drilling, or a biotech company that's got a drug close to market. And don't get me wrong, that is a viable strategy. You can make a bit of money that way. But I would say for the large majority of people, it's just starting. It's just getting in, and then letting time do the work for you. So, but like anything, investing can be passive, where you just trust your super to do it for you, or you go and buy an ETF or an LIC, or you can treat it like your career, and put the same amount of effort and time into it, and get that win over your competition, right? Which is the 99% of the population. So if you research mining, or if you're researching biotech, or if you're researching, you can get the advantage on these things and understand where the investment opportunity is in some of these businesses. So,
yeah, for sure, mate. We've talked quite a bit about work and your professional life. I want to switch it up and get into a bit more of the personal side of things, some of the stuff you do outside of work. I know you're big into your sports. Mixed martial arts, kickboxing have been staples for you over the years. Also, since a young age.
yep.
What role has that played in the sort of the development of you as a man, as a person, over the years? How can you sort of attribute that
Sure.
to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, honestly, it's been massive. I would say so. Yeah, as you mentioned, kickboxing, MMA, seen as a very difficult, a very hard sport, and it is. I've played a bit of league and played some other sports and things, and don't get me wrong, hard in their own right, but these two are sort of, yeah, it's brutal. You got to really mentally prepare yourself just to go to training through the week, because you're going to training knowing that you're going to be sparring 8 different people, and preparing for fights. You've got dieting, so you have to be really, resilient on your weight, and all these factors, where you're consciously having to make decisions, and be strict and resilient, and I think that has translates really, really well into life.
Yeah.
And you often see that with sports, people that play sports, right? They carry a lot of that into their life. So it's been huge for me. Yeah, I would not take it back, and it's definitely shaped who I am.
Yeah, it fuels that competitive edge that you spoke about as well, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
because I play football and do a bit of CrossFit. I don't do. I'm not. You won't find me in the ring getting any fight action personally. But I, as much as I enjoy the competitive side of my work and what I do, to me, there's nothing quite like the 90 minutes on a Saturday where I'm out on the field playing football. Like, when it's just my team against the other team.
sure.
It's just to me. That competition. I crave it. I absolutely can't.
Yeah.
It's nothing quite like it. Even in any sort of work environment, and it kind of goes back to what you, especially what that like, I'm not an expert in kickboxing, mixed martial arts, but I can imagine, as you say, it's very hard. It's very challenging. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, just doing hard things. If you can do that, if you can get in the ring with someone and get beaten up or whatever, then having a cold calling and a director of a business doesn't actually seem as daunting. Is that something you took maybe from it as well?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, definitely, because what you're doing is you're trying to control your emotions, right? Fighting was always seen as I suppose, a bit of a brutalist sport that maybe was of lower intelligence. now, when you look at some of the best fighters in the world, they are, IT experts and
Yeah.
people that are really analytical and sharp. So these, that type of mentality of being able to control your emotions um, and work through things as a process sets you up for success. Much the same as in your work life or your personal life, when there's those things that you really don't want to do, or it's a bit confronting, um, being able to push through that can mean the difference of being good at it
Yeah.
or not.
And this might be a bit of a curveball, but as a father, you've got two young kids.
Yep.
Um, how do you sort of plan on plan? How are you sort of raising them? Is that the because I hear a lot of people who are in that sort of mixed martial arts arena. They're very keen to throw their kids into that at a quite a young age, so it builds a bit of what all the things we've just spoken about. Is that on your plan? Are you going to do that to them?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe not kickboxing, maybe not
Okay.
cage fighting, but I think jiu-jitsu, so Brazilian jiu-jitsu would be
Mm.
is a great thing for kids, a great thing for anyone. You can do it
Yeah.
at any age. Um, there's a reason why it's probably the most sought after martial art. Like if you only did jiu-jitsu, you could probably cope with most situations. From
It's blowing up as well, isn't it? It's one of the fast, or if
oh,
one of the fastest
yeah,
growing sports or something.
it's huge. Yeah, it's because it's real. It
Yeah.
translates into real life situations. Um, some of these other, and I've done them before, taekwondo or karate or
Yeah.
these sorts of things. They don't prepare you for a real life situation. Whereas
Mm.
jiu-jitsu, I've seen 9-year-old girls put adult males to sleep, because it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'll definitely be pushing them in that direction.
Yeah. And you're always working on it, aren't you? You can always improve. It's just a lifelong
Yeah, exactly.
pursuit, and
Yeah,
yeah, that's
that's
pretty
one
cool.
of the. I think that's the beauty of Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. Is you're never done. You're never an expert.
Yeah.
There's always someone, you know, that's either better than you or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It can humble you real quick, I can imagine.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's what I've heard is quite cool about the classes. There might be like a CEO of a company at these training sessions, but no one would know about it, and they'll just come in,
yeah,
maybe get their ass handed to them by someone who's
yeah, 100%.
has no sort of.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Mate, I want to talk about a bit more about the present and the future as well. You've recently had a bit of a career switch up,
Yep.
moved on from Akzo Nobel. You're now with a business called Knotwood. You've been with them a couple of months now. So big move, with Akzo Nobel for a long time. We've spoken about. What are the sort of the ambitions with the new role? Where are you sort of hoping, or what are you hoping to achieve in the new position?
Yeah, yeah. So same title, so National Specification Manager. Um, Knotwood have some great products in the sort of architectural aluminium space with cladding and battens and screening and things like that. Um, so it's really about growing this business. It's a bit of a smaller business, obviously, than what I'm used to in corporate, um, which is exciting. Often smaller businesses are a bit more dynamic.
Yep.
You're a bit closer to the action and a bit closer to decisions being able to be made. Um, so yes, I'm quite excited about being able to shape some of that,
Mm.
and maybe steer the ship a bit faster. So one of the things that really attracted me to Knotwood was the people here. Um, Great culture, great people, and for me that at this stage in life started to become very important.
Yeah.
You want to enjoy what you do and enjoy who you do it with. So um, yeah, they've got that covered. So yeah, quite excited.
And market related, what's the sort of specification world? What's that? How is that at the moment? What sort of looking towards 2024? How sort of buoyant is that particular sector?
Um, Very buoyant, very
Yeah.
buoyant. There's been some challenges in recent years, obviously through cost implications and obviously lead times blowing out. So I see that the market's maybe changed a little bit. Um, there's a lot of stresses and sort of challenges for architects nowadays as well as builders. Obviously um, there's no secret there. Builders on big projects are obviously running on quite low margins and things as well. So a lot of value engineering, but for the most part, there's still a lot of investment over the coming years. In government infrastructure, hospitals and schools and things like that. So um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the coming years with
Yep.
the interest rates and things. Obviously, that drives uh, a lot of confidence in the market
Mm.
as well. So, but look, the commercial sector is so big. There's so many different sectors. There's always going to be opportunity
Yeah.
no matter what field you're in, um, or as any company that's willing to innovate. Um, there's always opportunities, right?
Yeah. Even when the market turns, there's always opportunities for
Exactly.
having the right.
Yeah.
I want to wrap this up with a few, hopefully not too big questions, but some broad sort of overarching things. What would you say if you look back at your career to date, the biggest sort of lesson that you've learned is?
Biggest lesson. I would say. I would say. Sorry, give me a second on this one. Um, Early on, I suppose my path was quite aggressive. I would say, and it was more about running full steam ahead, 100 miles an hour. As I've gotten on, um, I realised that it wasn't just me that was doing everything, and it was everyone around me. So I'd say the lesson that I'm starting to learn as I've gotten on a bit is um, what matters is really the people around you, um, and that can have a huge impact on your success or your failure. So what I would say is taking people on the journey with you.
Mm.
Um, and building others up. Yeah, that's been a big lesson for me. Something I wasn't so focused on
Yeah.
younger days, and potentially would have been an easier climb to the top
Okay.
if I'd realised.
Yeah. Okay. And what sort of core values do you have that you maybe identified, in the past,
Sure.
that you go, right? These are things that wherever I go, whoever I deal with,
Yeah.
whatever situation I'm put in, I want to. That's who I want to be, or that's how I want to act. What would you say those are for you?
Um, so for me, it's just being authentic, not putting on too much of a face. Just being true to yourself. So integrity is probably the word that comes to mind. Um, I think that always shines through in the end, rather than trying to be something that you're not. So yeah, just having integrity and doing things right. You know, doing things to a high level when no one's looking. I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. Integrity to yourself, isn't it? It's doing as you say, when no one's looking. That's when you only if you don't do the work. But
Yeah,
that's if you can hold on to that.
exactly. Yeah. You can get away with it for a while, but I think in the end, it'll show through.
And one final question for you, mate. We spoke a bit about your why and how it's evolved over the years. It's sort of linked to this
Yep.
around the idea of success.
Yep.
And I appreciate it may have changed over the years, but as we speak on this day, what does success mean to Codie Hair?
Success for me is really, I would say, taking care of the family. So having freedom. That's why we spoke about money before. Um, it's not actually money; it's freedom. Being able to make decisions and choices, maybe earlier in life rather than waiting till we're 60 and 70 and things like that. So success for me is being self-sufficient financially, and also to that point, raising the kids and into being prepared for the world in the way that I want them to be raised, and not reliant on having to go to university if they don't want to, or go down paths if that's not what makes them happy. You know what I mean? And I think being financially free is something that fixes a lot of that.
Yeah, massive. Sorry, I've just thought of one final question I actually need to ask you. We've spoken a little bit about some resources, some books that you've touched upon over the years, and I know you're big into listening to other podcasts, not just mine, other podcasts that you've gained a lot of wisdom for. Any that stand out to you that have been influential for you gaining some of the knowledge and wisdom that you've picked up that you would maybe recommend anyone that's listening?
Yeah, I'm big on podcasts more so than books. So I would say a couple of influential people that have made a really, I suppose, big impact would be Timothy Ferris, someone who really challenges the status quo in every part of his life. He's a human experiment, and he challenges himself everywhere. So Timothy Ferris would be a great one to look into. I really like Stephen Bartlett, so Diary of a CEO. He's also got a book out, which is good podcast, good read. And other than that, from a psychological point of view, I'd say Jordan Peterson. He's can be quite difficult to listen to at times, but very sharp man, and it has some really good points. So
yeah, nice one. Codie, thank you very much for coming on the show today, delivering all the the wisdom that you've just dropped there. I really appreciate you sharing everything you just did. I'm pretty sure I'll be listening back to this and maybe burning up some notes. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. Codie Hair, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you having me on. Cheers.